Hi, I'm Brian Klontz, President of the Emergency Assistance Foundation, and this is part 4 of a 4-part series on emergency assistance funds for disaster relief and employee hardship. In this section, I'm going to talk about the history, summary, and advantages of using the Emergency Assistance Foundation. So first, let's talk about the history of the foundation. We formed the foundation in 2012 after working all through 2011. And it really started because we received a call from a large employer that had a public charity that they had administered that had a disaster, unfortunately, affecting their employees back in the early 2000s. And one of the issues was, they said literally at 9:45 in the morning there was no disaster. At 9:50 in the morning there was a disaster. And they had to immediately respond both to all the employees that wanted to help as well as to the affected and impacted employees overseas. And they said it certainly had a number of growing pains to be able to meet that need as quickly and from complete startup to be able to be operational and to make grants. But then when the disaster subsided, thankfully, literally the charity became a file drawer charity again. So if another disaster were to occur, they would have to re-ramp up the entire operation, throw additional staff, go through the same learning curve that they went through originally. And they really came to the conclusion that that was not effective at all. So the ideal was to be able to find a separate charity with the existing infrastructure to be able to perform that function for the company and for its employees should a disaster occur again. So in looking for almost 1.5 years, I could not find a solution for this company beyond local community foundations in 5 or 6 cities that would only do that for local corporations. So we decided to create the Emergency Assistance Foundation specifically to be able to help employers private label their own emergency assistance funds for disaster relief and for employee hardship that could be both used domestically and internationally, specializing in this specific role. So in terms of the people we have, we've got an expert staff of 4 professionals, both with legal backgrounds, tax backgrounds, as well as the person that vetted almost 100 of these programs that exist to be able to capture all the best practices, performance standards, industry benchmarks, to be able to customize these programs for our specific employer donors. So the Emergency Assistance Foundation applied for tax-exempt public charity status in 2011, received full approval to be able to be a domestic and international disaster relief and employee hardship provider in early 2012. And now we are fully operational with a structure that allows our one umbrella public foundation to be able to create 1 or 150 funds for individual employer groups, whereby we are the ones responsible for the legal selection, for all of the compliance, for all of the regulation from a state-by-state basis, for the grant administration and fund processing. In essence, it's a turnkey charity to benefit employer groups to be able to provide tax-deductible contributions and tax-free grants. So what you'll see here is based on the structure that we've created, a flow chart that we hope will illuminate the tasks that each party is responsible for in terms of the employers, the employees, the oversight committee, and emergency assistance. So if you look at the middle of the slide, you'll see the employee and employer-funded fund within the Emergency Assistance Foundation that is specific to that employer group. You'll see the employer obviously is able to participate in the design, guidelines, the funding of the program. The oversight committee is set with being able to make the determinations on the size of the grants, the qualifications, whether it will be disaster relief and employee hardship. You see here too, the grant applications are submitted directly to the Emergency Assistance Foundation, and to the extent that those applications meet the qualifications within the guidelines, then we are the ones that legally make the grant to each employee. We are also the recipients of all the funds from the employees through payroll deduction or outright gifts, from the employer directly, or from the employer's corporate foundation. So all of those, again, we were able to provide full public charity tax benefits and tax deductions for those contributions. Finally, I'm going to talk about a summary and the top 10 advantages of using the Emergency Assistance Foundation. First is a customized employer fund for a turnkey program. The key with these programs is to be able to make sure that the donation fundraising plan and that the grants plan are optimal to be able to have a successful program in engaging the entire company in this effort, and to do so in a very low-cost way and through a turnkey fund establishment. Second, we have expert staff for the consulting on the front end, as well as ongoing consulting, as well as the direct grant and gift administration. Third, no setup costs and low ongoing fund expenses. Typically, our fees are only per grant application. Fourth, complete donation processing of all contributions from employees, from the corporation, or from its foundation. Fifth, complete grant processing, both individual vendor grants and both domestic and international. Sixth, we are fully compliant for state registration and solicitation. So rather than 10 different companies creating their own public foundations and having to register in all 50 states individually, we are able to do that once. And because each fund is legally part of the Emergency Assistance Foundation, then they don't have any additional compliance or ongoing expense. Seventh, tax-deductible donations and tax-free grants. Because the employer group has no legal control over the selection or the actual funds, the arm's length status of this charity is able to provide the maximum tax deductions, and the grants are tax-free. Eighth, international grant-making capabilities. We specifically included this within our 1023 tax exemption application, with the known fact that we're going to be doing a number of international grants primarily for multinational employer groups. Ninth, the collection and dissemination of best practices. So the more that we've reviewed, the more information that we collect, and we always say too, if you've seen one of these programs, you've seen one of these programs. So when we look at over 100 of these, there are actually 100 permutations of each program's design, history, initial formation, makes each one unique and distinct. And what we try to do is to collect that information to be able to provide the best match for each employer group that we work with. And 10th is networking with other employer funds. So to be able to share best practices, success stories, marketing ideas, grant success stories with others so that they can replicate that and make their program more successful is yet another reason to be able to work with the Emergency Assistance Foundation. So this concludes part 4 in the entire series of the Emergency Assistance Funds for disaster relief and employee hardship. I do hope this has been helpful, and I hope it gives you a much better idea as to the advantages, the history, the summary of working with the Emergency Assistance Foundation.